Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of the race car build for my DC2 Integra. It's been a fairly long time coming. I'd intended to start this a lot earlier in the year, but life gets in the way. I sold my previous race car, which was a Honda Civic, about 4 or 5 months ago now, and have been slowly collecting parts and getting ready to get stuck into this new Integra. Firstly, a bit about myself. My name is Shane. I'm originally from New Zealand, now living in Perth, Western Australia. I'm a mechanical engineer and very interested in motorsport. It's great fun, been doing it for a long time now. I started out with a Mitsubishi Evo 7, raced that for quite a few years, probably from 2014 through 2017. That was fairly highly modified, about 400 horsepower, big tyres, big brakes, good suspension. And at our local track, ended up with a 1 minute 5.0 lap time, which was pretty respectable back then for a street car. After that, I went overseas for a couple of years and then moved back to Perth in 2019. And on the advice of a few friends, and for something I've been wanting to do for a while, picked up a Honda Civic EG. This car had a B18C swapped into it from a DC2 Integra Type R. And over time, I sort of built that up, replaced all the suspension, all the brakes, did a lot of development work on the handling, and got that fairly competitive as well. I'll link a video in the description that is a build walkthrough of that, which I took just before I sold it. That car is fairly successful, set a pretty decent lap time at the local track, Wanneroo Raceway, 106.6, so not far off the Evo, which is really good for half the power. I also won the Targa Rallysprints series for 2021/2022 in the under 2 litre open class, which is a pretty cool achievement, and I did that with my co-driver Adrian Burney. It was great to have him alongside, and really fun series of events. That's mostly what I do with the racing. It's a mix of circuit sort of time attack style racing and Tarmac Rallysprints, but with this new build I want to sort of go slightly more towards circuit based, and I would like to take up one of the local classes called street cars, which is kind of fairly highly modified road-based cars. There's a good mix of different cars in there, so RX-7, Skylines, more Hondas, BMWs, big V8s, all sorts of stuff. So that's about it for me as a background. What I'll do now is start talking through a lot of the parts that I bought and the plans for this car, and what's coming up for the rest of the build. So firstly, what sort of events am I going to build this car for? So like I just mentioned, circuit racing is definitely the focus, but I still want to keep up the Tarmac Rallysprints. They're amazing fun, and you get to go to a lot of different sort of areas and little street-based circuits to have a go on. So that means it needs to be slightly compromised between the two, but on the whole, the build is pretty well circuit focused, just with slightly different suspension set up to suit the more Tarmac Rally stuff, which is a bit bumpier. In terms of chassis preparation, I've picked up this 1998 Honda Integra DC2. It's a VTEC B18C2. I grabbed this off a friend of mine, somebody I'd met through the Honda community, who was planning to build the car with his son, but both sort of ran out of motivation, unfortunately, and moved the car on to me. It had a bit of panel damage in the rear when I picked it up, which was why they were able to pick it up cheap in the first place, but that's all been fully repaired now. And once I sell the driveline out of this, it'll basically owe me nothing. And it's a very clean shell. It's done about 250,000 Ks, but super clean inside, super clean outside. No oil leaks, nothing. It's, for as far as an old Honda goes, it's pretty much brand new. So to get this ready for race car life, first thing we'll be stripping out all of the interior back to a complete bare shell, removing all the sound deadening, removing all the unneeded bracketry and anything else I can cut out of the car to save weight. Remove all the windows and the sunroof and get that sent off to get a full roll cage. This will be getting a national spec cage, so double door bars, FIA bars, everything you can think of to try and make it as safe as possible. Safety is number one, it always has been, and it's super important to make sure that's taken care of right from the start. For the driveline, I'm going with a K20 Z1 motor, which is from 2005-2006 Honda Integra DC5 Type S. These are some of the strongest K20s you can find without going to the full JDM Type R motor, about 210 horsepower stock. For the engine itself, it'll be kept pretty stock for now. In future, I might go for a built bottom end, but at this stage, it's just going to be a set of cams, springs and retainers up top, and a bit of a refresh all round. and good exhaust and good intake. So intake manifold, I've picked up a Skunk 2 Ultra Street manifold, and exhaust is just the standard old PLM V2 headers. Hoping for around 210, 220 horsepower at the wheels once it's all done, which will be 60, 70 horsepower more than what my previous Civic was putting out, and a boatload more torque, so really looking forward to that. In terms of gearbox, it's the standard Type S gearbox, but it's been completely rebuilt. It's essentially brand new. So I've got a V3 close ratio gear set from BYP over in Sydney. That has an aftermarket first and second gear, which are really tall, so like 2.6 first gear, 1.6 second gear, and then a mix and match of OEM ratios for third through sixth, which makes the spacing incredibly close. First gear will do about 90-95 kilometers an hour, and sixth gear will be about 250 kilometers an hour on the tyres that I'm running. While I was getting rebuilt, I've put an OS Geekin 1.1 way limited slip diff. That's a clutch type LSD. They appear to be the best of the best. A lot of my friends have had really good luck running those. And that makes a massive difference over a standard type sort of helical LSD. You won't spin one of the tyres ever. It'll always maintain traction. And that's super handy for the tracks where you need to bang off the curbs to be fast, like the Collie track in Western Australia. That's very important for that. Picked up some K-swap axles from Hasport. These are chromoly axles, and they're sized to the length is the right length to fit into the DC and EG chassis. And for cooling and oil control, picked up Koyo radiator. That's a K-swap radiator, and most importantly, a Unit 2 Elite sump. This thing's huge. It takes about 9 litres of oil capacity, and these are used on a number of race cars up to sort of 2.5, 3G cornering, which is far more than I'll ever see, with no oil control issues. So it's about as good as you can go before jumping across to a dry sump. On the shifter front, I've picked up an Acuity 4-way adjustable shifter. It's machined work of art. One of my friends has one on his car, and it's just the best shifter feel I've ever felt. So I'm really looking forward to how direct that is, and also the adjustability. They have it up close to the steering wheel, for meaning you don't have to move your hand very far at all when you're going to shift gear. A lot easier to control the vehicle on that. For suspension, essentially everything on the car will be brand new and upgraded. Starting with the coilovers, I've gone with Shockworks, which are a local Australian company, very highly regarded and custom built to your specification. They're just single adjustables, but it's a great way to get the car set up for now, and maybe down the track we'll go to something 2 or 3-way adjustable if it gets developed that far. Spring rates, these are running 20 kg front springs and 14 kg rears. That seems fairly high, but the Hondas seem to love a high spring rate, and especially the amount of grip I'll be running in the car, that's much needed. But yet I had sort of 16 kg springs on my EG Civic, and that was actually fairly soft for the amount of tyre I was running. So I'm looking forward to these, and from all accounts they work really, really well. For suspension arms, literally everything's being changed out for spherical bearings. There's no bushes left on the car at all, apart from the sway bar bushes. So it'll, one, reduce a lot of binding and stiction in the suspension as it moves through its range of motion. But two, it stops any alignment changes at all under braking or acceleration or cornering. That's rock solid. Really looking forward to how tight and direct this is going to feel. Lower control arms, I've got the PCI billet aluminium front lower control arms and PCI spherical compliance bushing. For upper control arms, I've gone for the Hone Developments upper control arms. Most upper control arms for Honda chassis just use a little friction joint to adjust camber. These have a little sawtooth sort of adjustability in there. You can probably see it, the gold to the black. That locks the camber in place. That's not moving at all. Really looking forward to this, because I've had pretty much all of my old upper control arms move and change camber alignment as you hit a curb or just do a few too many track days, and it moves itself out of alignment. Down the back, more PCI, so that's a PCI billet lower control arm there, and then also a PCI trailing arm bush. For the upper arms, the camber arm is an adjustable honed development piece. That's got a ball joint on the inside and spherical on the outside, and that can also be shifted up and down where it meets the chassis to change the camber curve of the rear end. And for toe, I've gone for honed toe control arms here. These have a coarse level of adjustability with the sawtooth between the two pieces of the arm there, and then also an eccentric to where it mounts to the chassis for your fine adjustment. In terms of reinforcement, I've got honed developments, gussets for the rear trailing arms. That's really important when you start throwing a lot of tyre at these cars. They do tend to fatigue and crack the rear trailing arms. And I've also got a full roll centre correction kit from Honed as well. So on the rear has this little bracket here which bolts onto the lower control arm and spaces down the mounting point for the lower control arm. Changes the angle of that lower control arm when you're at your ride height, essentially the same as raising a car. So that corrects your roll centre and has it in a much better spot. That's important because when you lower cars a lot from their standard ride height, which you do for a race car, that throws the arm geometry way out of whack, and your roll centres get to a point where they're not very optimal for handling because the manufacturers obviously set them up to be correct at their standard ride height, which is far too high for what we do. So this introduces a lot more roll stiffness into the car. It's the same effect as adding a much larger rear sway bar, but it does it without having to have a very large rear sway bar or high rear spring rates, so lets the suspension work, but you still get the right roll stiffness. And that's I did the same thing to my previous Civic, and that made a huge improvement. Up front, that's achieved by having extended ball joints. You can see the gold collar on the ball joint at the bottom of the knuckle there. That does the same thing. It spaces down the lower control arm where it mounts. And also adjustable tie rods. So these tie rod ends here have spaces where they bolt on to the knuckle, and you can space them up or down to change the toe curve based on a number of settings you put into it. And yeah, same again, I had that set up on my EG Civic and it was really, really good. So looking forward to running it again on my Integra. For brakes, out back, I've got DC2 Type R calipers. I managed to find a couple of those brand or remanufactured over in America. And just your standard DBA sort of T2 rotors. Now they're about 30mm larger in diameter than the standard rotors. And you can also see they're 5-stud. So I've converted the whole car to 5-stud. It was currently 4-stud. And that makes finding the right wheels a lot easier, and also has bigger wheel bearings, which is important. On my previous Civic, I used to do a front left wheel bearing probably every 8 to 10 events, which is a lot. And that's because our local track is all right-hand turn, so it's very highly loaded on that left-hand side. So hoping that with these large bearings, they'll last a lot longer between service intervals. For pads out back, I'll be running a WinMax W3, which is sort of their mid-range, and that'll be complemented up front by a WinMax W6.5, which is their Tarmac rally pad. They work great. They turn on straight away, and they're good right up to sort of 850 degrees, so very good for long track sessions. Up front, I don't actually have any brakes yet. That's something on my list to order, but I have converted the front to 5-stud, as you can see. So that has Honda CR-V knuckles, which are incidentally exactly the same as a Honda Integra Type R. So, but a lot easier to find and a lot cheaper. For front brakes, I'll probably end up going with a 330mm Alcon 4-pot setup. That seems to be the most economical of the decent big brake kits around. Pad availability is everywhere, so that's all good. And there's a localish supplier over on the eastern states of Australia that keeps all those replacement rotors, rings, hardware in stock. So it's an easy way to go. Brake control, that's one that's very important as well. I love a very stiff pedal. I want to absolutely stand on it as hard as I can, and that makes it far easier to sort of modulate your pressure on the brake pedal when you're at the limit of grip and avoid yourself locking up. So to do that, we delete the brake booster entirely, and that involves a change in the pedal ratio as well. So you can re-drill the pivot point on the pedal. That's all achieved by a Honed Developments boosted delete kit. You can see it bolted to the back of the master cylinder there, and that uses a 7/8 inch EK Civic master cylinder, so I just picked up a new one of them online as well. For safety gear, like I mentioned earlier, the car will be getting a full roll cage. To go with that, I've currently got this Velo head restraint seat. It came with the car, so it was a great deal. It's brand new, but unfortunately it doesn't quite fit me properly. So you can see the head restraint hoops come down quite far, and that pinches in my shoulders. So I think I'll probably move on the seat and grab a Racetech head restraint seat. Just got to find one and go for a test fit before I get into it. Outside of that, it'll just have the usual 6-point harnesses, fire extinguisher. I've got a really good helmet and a head and neck restraint as well. So once I'm in, I won't be moving. Electronics is something else that I also haven't purchased. That'll be left till right at the end of the build. One, because it's bloody expensive, and two, because I don't quite know what I want to run yet. Ideally, it'd be full Motec, so Motec ECU, Motec PDM, and Motec logging dash. But more than likely budget will dictate something a little bit cheaper, either Haltech or Link. But either way, it'll be a full standalone ECU, using a PDM for managing all the power distribution throughout the vehicle. It's all solid state, replaces a fuse box, and is far easier to set up. And for data logging, I already have an AIM Solo 2 data logger. So whatever I end up with, I can probably integrate that into the system as well. That's been a huge help. We do the data logging for ourselves and a lot of our friends at the track, and we're all seeing massive gains by studying that data, find out where we can go faster, comparing amongst ourselves to see who does certain corners better, and taking those learnings and putting them in our own laps. We've seen results of 1 or 2 seconds knocked off people's PBs just through a bit of driver coaching and a bit of data analysis. So it's super powerful, and it's definitely something I want to continue doing with this car here. We'll probably take it a step further, install a lot more sensors to help with that. So things like a steering angle sensor, brake pressure sensor, and suspension travel potentiometers. And that gives you the full range of data of exactly what the car's doing at any time. And you can use that to figure out if the suspension's doing what it's supposed to do, and also if the driver's doing what they're supposed to do. So the right braking technique, right steering technique, all that sort of stuff. Really looking forward to it. As I said, I'm an engineer, so I love getting nerdy with everything that I can and getting right into the detail. So it's going to be a pretty fun time learning about all of this. And I'm looking forward to some good results out of it. I think it'll be a huge help to setting this car up to be successful. Long term, it'll probably get some aerodynamics as well. At this stage, I'll just do like a basic front splitter, probably just out of plywood for now, and a bit of a rear wing. Rear wing is something ideally I'd make out of carbon fibre, but I'll probably end up just 3D printing the wing sections and running that across like a aluminium piece of square tubing to give it the strength. Budget's pretty tight for all that stuff, so we'll just do the basics up first and then go into some more sort of in-depth aerodynamics later on with proper side skirts, and try and get as much of a flat floor as possible. It's all pretty restricted by class rules, depending which class I want to race in. At the moment, front splitter and rear wing's about all you can do, but down the track we'll see what happens. So that's a pretty basic overview of what the plan is. Now I just need to spend the next 6 or 12 months pulling this car to bits and putting it back together with all the new stuff. It's going to be a ton of work, a lot of learning involved along the way, which I'm really looking forward to. But motivation is pretty high. I haven't raced for probably 6 odd months now, and I'm starting to get the itch again. And it's also been great seeing my friends getting out and doing their racing and helping them, so that's really put me in the mood to get on with this. Long-term goals for the car, ideally, it's a pretty lofty goal, but the fastest under 2 litre outright vehicle in Western Australia would be the ultimate goal. That's currently a 102.4 at our local track, Wanneroo Raceway, which is held by a BMW Super Tourer from back in the 90s or early 2000s. There's a few Hondas that are pretty close to that now. A couple of the local race cars are sort of down near very low 103s or high 102s, and I don't see any reason that I can't be in that same ballpark. I think the transmission I've got in this, the power that I have in this, and the corner speeds that I know I'm going to get out of this, based on my experience with the Civic, will put me right there. So pretty keen to do that. Once I can hit that record, maybe step it up a notch and go to a built K24 to get a lot more power, and see where I go from there. It'd be great to compete at World Time Attack Challenge in Sydney one day. It's a long way away, but it'll be an awesome experience, so pretty keen. Anyway, that's enough of the plan. Now I'm going to jump into stripping the interior, and after that pull out the driveline, get all that stuff sold off, and get the shell prepped for roll cage. Thanks very much. See you all next time.